Shabbat Shalom. Enjoying the snow?
Yeah.
I forgot to mention to you last week when you said that there were no holidays, and our one there is next Shabbat is Lincoln's birthday.
That's right. That's right.
You know, he was Jewish, right? He was shot in the temple.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. There is Lincoln's birthday.
That's one of my best jokes. Come on.
That's a funny joke. All right.
Okay.
Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to Congregation Agudat Achim's in-person and live stream Shabbat morning service. This morning, we have the opportunity to read Parshat Trumah together, which is a real gift. Because the word Trumah means gift, y'all. This morning's Psukei de Zimra opportunity is Iyun Tfilah, an opportunity to do some study of prayer or as part of prayer. And I want to introduce that with a little bit of background, which is when the ritual committee was discussing this opportunity to do creative Psukei de Zimra, creative warm-ups for prayer, we made sort of a list of all of the different ways that a person could warm up for prayer that are contained in our traditional liturgy. And our traditional liturgy has song, it has poetry, it has chant, it has so many different ways of engaging. But one of the chief ways that we often pass over in our Psukei de Zimra, in our verses of praise and our warm-up for prayer, is the section about Torah study that's right in the front. So today's Iyun Tfilah, today's study of the Torah, today's study of prayer, that is going to be the major part of our Psukei de Zimra, is actually going to be a study of the blessings for Torah study that are part of our warm-up for our service. So we begin on page 101 with Ma Tovu, prayers upon entering the synagogue. And again, whether you're joining here in the sanctuary or whether you're at home, the place that you dedicate yourself to engaging with the divine on Shabbat, that is a synagogue, a mikdash me'at, a minor sanctuary, an opportunity to really make each place that we engage holy. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. rise for the morning blessings, page 103. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lasech v'bina להבחין בין יום ובין לילה. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שעשני בצלמו. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שעשני בן חורין. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שעשני ישראל. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Pokeach Ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish arumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam tokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam roka haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasali kol tzarki. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozei Yisrael bigvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'tifara. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten l'yayif koach. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam Uneinu hayom v'chol yom l'cheinu chesed rachamim b'einecho v'nei koreinu v'tikumenu chasdim tovim. Baruch atah Adonai gomel chasdim tovim l'amo Yisrael le'olam yihei adam rishon v'v'sader v'kol yom. Halo kol yimim Ki chol maseim tohu b'mechayim hevel lefanecha u'motar hadam min habema ayin ki hakol havel havel anacham. Ashreinu matok lakeinu manayim gorleinu mayafa yushateinu. Ashreinu shanachnu mashkimim ma'ariv yimera b'boker v'min pamayim b'chol yom. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Atahu Adshel Nivra Olam Atahu Misha Nivra Olam Atahu Kadesh et Shimcha al Makdishei Shemecha V'Kadesh et Shimcha b'Olamecha V'Yishuatcha Tarim V'Zagvia Karneinu Baruch atah Adonai V'Kadesh et Shimcha b'Rabim. We turn now to page 107. But as I mentioned at the beginning, our creative option for Psukei de Zimra this morning is Iyun Tfilah, the opportunity to study prayer. And today we're going to be studying Torah study. So as you can see on page 107, the blessings for Torah study are contained as part of our Psukei de Zimra, part of our warm-up for prayer. The rabbis understood that studying is part of how we warm up for prayer. So the Talmud asks in Masechet Brachot, in the tractate that deals with blessings, Minayin libirkat haTorah lefaneha min haTorah. From where in the Torah do we derive the mitzvah for saying a blessing before studying Torah? And then it gives a verse, Shene'emar. Here's the verse from which the Torah study is derived. Ki Shem Adonai Ekra Havu Godel Eloheinu. When I proclaim the Lord's name, give glory to our God. So that verse, which is from Deuteronomy chapter 32, is contained in the song that Moshe sings at the end of his life, the Ha'azinu song. And it is understood that what it means when Moses said, Ki Shem Adonai Ekra, when I proclaim the Lord's name, is when I give over Torah to you. And then the instruction that Moshe gives the people, Havu Godel Eloheinu, you should praise God. You should offer glory to God. And so this is the verse that the rabbis attach the mitzvah of saying a blessing before Torah study. Now, the mitzvah of Torah study is actually codified in our codes. And the Rambam says in Hilchot Tefillah Uvirkat Kohanim, in the laws of prayer and the priestly blessing, the Rambam says, Bechol Yom, every day, Chayav Adam, a person is obligated, Livarech, to bless, Shalosh Berachot Elu, these three blessings, Ve'achar Kach, Korei Me'at Medivrei Torah, and afterwards should read some portion of the Torah, some words of Torah. V'nahagu ha'am likro, and already in the time of Rambam, which is the 12th century Spain, already in the time of the Rambam, it was the custom that what we said when we said these morning blessings was Birkat Kohanim. V'nahagu ha'am likro, Birkat Kohanim, and the people have the custom to read the priestly benediction. V'yesh mikomot shekorin tzav et bnei Yisrael, and there are some places that also read the passage of the daily offering, which is not in our Siddur, but if you do look at page 107, right in the middle of it is the words Yevarecha Adonai v'Yishmerecha. That's the priestly blessing. So we do have that as our custom, but it isn't our custom to read the part that has to do with the daily offering. The Yesh Mekomot Shekorin Shtehen, there are some places where it's customary to read both the priestly blessing and the daily offering. V'korin prakim o halachot min ha-mishnah. Chapters or paragraphs from the Mishnah or from the Talmud are also read. And you can see on our page that we have a passage from the Mishnah and a passage from the Talmud, so that when we intend to study Torah, we are also including Mishnah and Talmud in our study, and we're doing that right after we say these blessings. So now I want us to read the blessings together in Hebrew, and then we'll read the translation in English. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. V'heravna Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu u'v'fi amcha beit Yisrael v'niyeh anachnu v'tzetzaenu v'tzetzei amcha beit Yisrael kulanu yodei shemecha v'lomdei Toratecha lishma. Baruch atah Adonai hamelamed Torah le'amo Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah. Baruch atah Adonai, our God, sovereign of time and space, who has provided us with a path to holiness through the observance of mitzvot and has instructed us to engage with the words of Torah. May you make the words of your Torah sweet in our mouths and in the mouths of the house of Israel, your people, so that we, our children, and all the children of the house of Israel may come to know your name and study Torah for its own sake. Baruch atah Adonai, who teaches Torah to your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, our God, sovereign of time and space, who has chosen us from among all peoples, giving us the Torah. Baruch atah Adonai, who gives the Torah. And then we read these three passages. So the first passage, as we've discussed, is from the book of Numbers, and it is the priestly blessing. So let's read that together. Yevarecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May Adonai bless you and protect you. May Adonai's countenance shine upon you, and may Adonai bestow kindness upon you. May Adonai's countenance be lifted toward you, and may Adonai grant you peace. And so we find in this passage it's a prayer for blessing, a prayer for God's face to be turned toward us, a prayer for relationship, and ultimately a prayer for peace. It is very powerful language of blessing, and it's customary for us to start every day where these are the 3 verses that we read from the Torah after saying the blessings for Torah study. I mean, if you had to choose 3 verses from the whole Torah, would you have chosen these? Would you have chosen these 3? And there are so many different verses in the Torah, but to choose these 3 really says something very powerful about what the Torah is for and what Torah study is about, right? Torah study is about connecting, about feeling Adonai's countenance upon us, about being in relationship with the divine. All right, so then we move to the passage from the Mishnah, and this Mishnah is from is the opening chapter, the opening halacha, the opening Mishnah in the first chapter of Mishnah Peah. And Mishnah Peah deals with the laws of giving tzedakah, right? Mishnah Peah deals with the laws, the agricultural laws of what it means to leave the corners of your field untouched, right? The Peah is the corners of your field. And if you were a farmer in ancient Israel, it was the law that you had to leave the corners of your field untouched so that the poor could eat from the corners. Now, what does it mean to have a corner of a field? How much corner is it talking about? And that's where our Mishnah picks up. Our Mishnah says, Elu divarim she'ein lahem shiur. These are the deeds for which there is no prescribed maximum amount, no prescribed measure. Hapeya, this is why this Mishnah comes at the beginning of this chapter, right? There's no prescribed maximum amount for how much corner it means to leave when it says to leave your corners, right? You could leave your whole field. There's no maximum amount, okay? You have to leave something. Now, in the next Mishnah, it gives the minimum amount. In the next Mishnah, it says you can't leave less than 1/60th of your field, okay? So it's not true that there is no prescribed amount at all, but there's no prescribed maximum amount. These are things which you can do and continue to do them ad infinitum, right? You can do them as much as it is in your capacity to do. So Peah is the first, and then Ve'abikurim, which is bringing the first fruits to the temple. How much of the first fruits? How many weeks into the season is it still first fruits, right? There's no maximum amount. Ve'areayon, pilgrimage offerings on the 3 festivals. Ugmilut chasadim, deeds of kindness and love. V'talmud Torah. So, on the one hand, the reason why this is here in our daily passages of study is because it mentions the power of studying Torah, right? There's no maximum amount for studying Torah. There might be a minimum amount, and I think what the rabbis are saying by putting this Mishnah here is saying the minimum amount of Torah study that you should do is, right, this Mishnah. You should remind yourself that there's no maximum. But it's not just about Torah study, right? It's also about gemilut chasadim. It's also about acts of love. Every day, we start out our day studying passages of Torah that remind us that God's love is infinite, that God wants to be in relationship with us, that we are praying for God's countenance to shine upon us. And we also read a challenge that our love, our acts of loving kindness, should have no maximum upper boundary. We should be willing to do as much as we are capable of doing. And then, so that we also study a passage from the Talmud, and this passage from the Talmud is from Masechet Kiddushin, and it says, Elu devarim she'adam ochel peroteim ba'olam hazeh ve'akeren kayemet lo le'olam haba. Right? These are the deeds, the actions that a person can do, that they get benefit from them immediately, and also get benefit from them in the world to come. In other words, this is the language of interest and principle, right? In the Talmud and Kiddushin, where this comes up, we're talking about who has control over the property of who has control over property that comes into a marriage. And the understanding is, right, that the property itself belongs to the person that it belonged to when they came into the marriage, but the rabbis understand that the peirot, the interest from that property, at anything that grows from it, right, the principle belongs to the woman who comes into the marriage, right? But the interest is able to be used by the husband, right? In this classical understanding of this relationship, the interest is able to be used by the husband to help to pay for the family's needs. And so, then in the context of this, they're disagreeing about something, and somebody quotes this Baraita, which says these are things that a person gets the interest from in this world, but the principle remains for them to the world to come, and they are kibud av ve'em, right? Honoring your parents, ugmilut chasadim, and performing deeds of kindness and love, v'hashkamat beit hamidrash shacharit v'arvit, and coming to do learning and prayer at the house of study, morning and evening. That's Shacharit and Arvit, our morning and evening services. V'hachnasat orchim, hospitality toward guests. Uvikur cholim, and visiting the sick. V'achnasat kala, and providing for the needs of a bride who doesn't have enough money to have a dowry. Uleviyat hamet, attending a funeral, accompanying the dead to burial. Uleviyat hamet, v'iyun tefillah, and study of prayer, which is exactly what we're doing right now. Iyun tefillah, probing the meanings of prayers. V'avat shalom ben adam l'chaviro v'nish leishto, and making peace between fellow human beings and also between partners. V'talmud Torah keneged kulam, and the study of Torah is the most basic of them all, or another way to understand it is, and the study of Torah leads to all of these. Or another way to understand it is, and the study of Torah is greater than all of these. V'talmud Torah keneged kulam. Of course, right? Why do we get this passage from the Talmud? We get this passage from the Talmud because it is responding to this Mishnah in Peah. They're connected. But we also get this passage from the Talmud because it reminds us of what exactly it means when it says that Gemilut Chasadim have no measure. What Gemilut Chasadim are we talking about? We're talking about Leviyat Hamet, Iyun Tfilah. We're talking about Hachnasat Orchim, and we're talking about coming to Shul morning and evening. So these passages, which are about the power of Torah study, are about the power of Torah study to show us love in this world, and the power of Torah study to inspire us to loving action in this world. And we begin our service every day with these words being a part of the Psukei de Zimra, part of our warm-up for prayer. Before you can even pray, You have to imagine, you have to intend that your Torah study will lead you to loving actions in the world. The Maharshal, whose name was Shlomo Luria, was a Polish rabbi who lived in the 16th century of the Common Era. He was a descendant of Rashi, and he served as the Rosh Yeshiva of the yeshiva in Lublin. He wrote in a teshuvah, in a legal response, he wrote, Kisheani kam mimitati, when I get up from my bed in the morning, I wash my hands, v'rochetz yadai, which is traditional, to wash your hands, netilat yadayim, in the morning. Now, when I do that, I wash my hands and say the blessing. Right? He says that his custom is not to do the blessing on Netilat Yadayim until he comes to synagogue. Okay? But when he gets to synagogue, then he washes his hands on Netilat Yadayim again, and then he says the blessing. But he does wash his hands on Netilat Yadayim right at the beginning of his day. Immediately thereafter, I recite Asher Yatzar, which is the blessing after going to the bathroom. So presumably he gets up, goes to the bathroom, relieves himself, then he washes his hands without a bracha, and then he says Asher Yatzar, the blessing, thanking God for having a functioning, working body, and then Elohai Neshama, which is the blessing, thanking God for having a soul and for having returned the soul to the body. Then he says the benedictions on Torah study, which we just read together. And then his custom is to add 3 verses from the Torah, 3 verses from Nevi'im, and 3 verses from Ketuvim, in addition to the Mishnah Peah that we just read. So we read 3 verses from Torah, 3 verses from Mishnah, one passage of Mishnah, and then a passage from the Talmud. But what he would do is he would read 3 from Torah, 3 from Nevi'im, 3 from Ketuvim. So, what 3 did he choose? His 3 from Torah are Leviticus 19, 16 to 18. So instead of doing the priestly benediction, which is what we do, his custom was to read Lo telech rachil be'amecha, lo ta'amod al dam re'echa ani Adonai. Do not deal basely with your countrymen. Do not profit by the blood of your fellow. I am the Lord. Lo tisna et achicha bilvavecha, hochiach tochiach et amitecha, v'lo tisa alav chet. You shall not hate your kinsfolk in your heart. You reprove your kinsman, but incur no guilt because of him. Lo tikom v'lo titor et b'nei amecha ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha ani Adonai. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against your countrymen. Love your fellow as yourself. I am the Lord. So his 3 verses from the Torah are not about relationship with God, but about the importance of about the importance of loving your fellow human being. Of course, it's not that God is absent from these verses. God, at the end of every one of these verses, God says, and you should do this because I am God, right? And it's part of that chapter where it's Kiddoshim to you shall be holy, because I, the Lord your God, am holy. So it's part of what it means to imitate God is to do ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, to love your fellow as to love your neighbor as yourself. And he would start his day every day reading that. And what was the passage from Nevi'im, from prophets, that he would read? Joshua 1, 7 to 9. But you must be very strong and resolute to observe faithfully all the Torah that my servant Moses enjoined upon you. Do not deviate from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Let not this Torah, this Sefer Torah, cease from your lips, but recite it day and night so that you may observe faithfully all that is written on it. Only then will you prosper in your undertakings, and only then will you be successful. I charge you, be strong and resolute. Do not be terrified or dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. So what does it mean here, right? He's bringing this passage from Joshua where Joshua says, don't ever stop studying Torah. Don't ever stop studying Torah. In some ways, that's sort of a similar message as the message from Mishnah Peah, which is, these are the things that have no measure, including Torah study. Right? Study Torah as much as it is possible for you to do. And then his 3 verses from Psalms, from Ketuvim, from Psalm 1, verses 1 to 3. Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach b'atzat risha'im u'v'derech hata'im lo amad u'moshav leitzim lo yashav. Happy is the person who has not followed the counsel of the wicked, or taken the path of the sinners, or joined the company of the insolent. Rather, the teaching of the Lord, Torat Adonai Cheftzo, the teaching of the Lord is his delight, and he studies that teaching day and night. Right? Again, it's a passage from Psalms about studying Torah. He is like a tree planted beside streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, whose foliage never fades, and whatever it produces thrives. In other words, right, his 3 passages from the Torah are all about the power of Torah study to build relationship, and what it means to build relationship with each other, with human beings. So I just want to close our Iyun Tfilah, our study of this portion of our service, with a very, very interesting and powerful Tosafot on the Talmud. So the Tosafot were the grandchildren of Rashi, who also wrote commentaries on the Talmud. And the big project of the Tosafot was to explain the differences between different passages of Talmud. So just like the Talmud was really interested in understanding why there are parts of the Mishnah that disagreed with other parts of the Mishnah, the Tosafot were really interested in continuing that project and understanding the Talmud as a whole. So they are commenting on a passage from the Talmud that asks, what things do you need to say a blessing on multiple times in the day? So say you eat an apple for breakfast, and you say Borei Pri Ha'etz on that apple, and then you also have an apple for lunch. Do you need to say Borei Pri Ha'etz again on that apple? And the answer is, yes, you do, right? Because it's a new event. It's a new event. Every time you eat, you have to say the blessings on eating and the blessings after eating. Every time. On Sukkot, when you enter the sukkah and you say, Asher kichanu mitzvotav etzivanu leishev basukah, is it enough to bless that you're dwelling in that sukkah for that whole day? Or do you have to bless every time you come into the sukkah to eat or sleep or dwell in the sukkah? The answer is, you have to say that blessing every time you come to the sukkah. But there is one counterexample to this. In general, the rule is that you have to repeat the blessing every time you come. But the one exception to that rule is Torah study. And the Tosfot say, but the bracha asher bachar banu, and the bracha lasuk b'divrei Torah, which is the essence of Birkat HaTorah, exempts you from that blessing all day. By the way, this is why we don't have to say the blessing for Torah study every time we begin studying Torah. Because the assumption is you said it right at the beginning of your study, of your day, and it counts for the whole day. And if you say, what is the difference between the sukkah, which you have to bless on every meal, and that you sit in the sukkah, what is the difference between the Torah study and the sukkah? The difference is that it says about study of Torah, v'hagita bo yomam v'layla, v'hagita bo yomam v'layla, you shall study it day and night, which, by the way, is a quote from that passage from Joshua that we read. V'hagita bo yomam v'layla, you shall study the Torah day and night. And so, the Tosfot say, everything that you do in your day is considered to be Torah study. So it's like you're studying Torah all day without stopping. In other words, the reason why you never have to say another Torah blessing is because you were, in fact, you never stopped studying Torah at all. And I think that is huge. I mean, that is a huge and powerful lesson, which is prayer is Torah study. Gemilut Chasadim is Torah study. Conversations with your friends is Torah study. Being with your family is Torah study. Everything that you do is engaging in the words of Torah. And everything that you do should be done with the consciousness that you are engaging in the words of Torah. So that's our focus here on Iyun Tfilah, our focus on beginning our service with study. And we're going to continue now with the words of Kaddish D'Rabbanan, page 111, Kaddish D'Rabbanan. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah be'alma divra kirutei ve'amlich malchutei v'chayechon u'vyomechon u'v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael ba'agala u'bizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam olamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudesha brichu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Al Yisrael ve'al Rabbanan ve'al Talmidehon ve'al kol Talmidehon ve'al kol man daskim be'oraita diva trahadein v'diva chol atar v'atar. Yehei lahon lachon shlama rabah china v'chista v'rachamin v'chayin aryechin umzonar v'cha u'forkana min kodam v'hon divishmaya v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabah min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'chayim tovim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Seh shalom imramav hu brachamav yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. We continue now with Baruch She'amar. We rise, page 122. Baruch She'amar v'yaolam Baruch Hu Baruch Hu Zevrishi Baruch Hu Me'er Yachid Chai Olamim Melech Mishubach M'Bordi Ad Shemo Agadol Baruch Atah Adonai Melech Me'ulav Atishbachot. You may be seated as we continue with Ashrei, page 136. Ashrei Yoshvi V'Techod U'Chasel Hashem. Tila Adonai daber pi, v'rach v'tagim v'chol olam b'ed, v'nach nevarach ya, mi'atavet olam aliyah. We continue on page 141. Aliyah, halu el b'kodsho. Kol anshamat aliyah, aliyah, kol anshamat aliyah, aliyah. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen v'Amen. Baruch Adonai Mitzion Shechan Yishalayim, Aliyah. Baruch Adonai Elohim Elei Yisrael Seniflo Levado. Baruch Shem Kodo Le'olam, V'Yimlech Vodo Kol Haaretz, Amen v'Amen. Vayavarech David et Adonai Le'nei Kol HaKahav, Vayomer David. Samta Shem Avraham, Matzata Levavo, Ne'eman Lefanecha, V'charot Yima Brit. V'hayam Bakad Alivneihem, V'yirvut V'chayam Yabasha, V'refei Mishlag Levin Tzalot, K'moev V'mayim Azim, V'yoshan Aviyamorim. Vayaminu Adonai Moshe Avdo, Az Yasher Moshe. Anayim L'Olam Boed, Anayim L'Olam Boed. Vatikach Miriam Neviachon Aaron et Dov biyadav, v'titzena kol hanashim achareha b'tubim v'mcholot. V'atan lahem Miriam shir Adonai ki goga, sus rachvo ramabayam. Ki l'Adonai melcha v'shavavayim, al moshim yartzon nishbot adayisab. V'ayta Adonai melcha, v'yad Adonai l'melech al kol haaretz. V'yamav Adonai echad, Yishemo echad. Page 145, you may be seated. Nishmat kol chai, tzivarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu. Ki chopeh lecha yodeh, v'chol lashon lecha tishava. V'chol berech lecha tichra, v'chol koma lefanecha tishachave, v'chol levavot yiraucha, v'chol kerev uchayot yizamru lishmecha, kadavar shekatuv, kol atzmotai tomar Adonai mi chamocha, matzil ani mechazak mimenu, v'ani v'evyon mi gazalo, min melach u'mi yishvelach, u'mi yaroch lach. Hay Allah Gadol Gibor Banora, El Elyon Ganesh Shamayim V'Aretz, Na'alel Chanesh Becha Nefaecha, Nevarech Hashem Kodecha Kamor LeDavid, Barchi Nafshi Et Adonai, Bechol Keravai Et Shem Kodsho. Tatsumo to Zecha Hagadol Bichvod Shemecha Hagibor LaNetzach Vehanora Venorotecha Shochenad marom v'kadosh shemo v'chadu v'ran tzadikim anamim. Great Tzadikim Tin Marach, Ushon Chazim Tin Ramam, Bekerev Kedoshim, Tin Kadash, Makalot, Rivavot, Amchavim. Shekem Chavad, Kol Yitzim Lefanech Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avoteinu, Lodot Lalel, L'Shabeach, L'Foel, L'Ramim Lalel, L'Varech Lalel, L'Kaleis, Al Kol Divrei Shiro V'Tishbecho, David Ben Yishai, Avdecha Meshichecha. We rise for Yishtabach, page 148. Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad Malkeinu, Ha'el HaMelech Birachot Tehodaot, Me'ata V'yad Olam Baruch Ata Adonai, El Melech Adon B'Tishbachot, El Ha'odaot Adon HaNiflaot, Habochei B'Shirei Zimra, Melech El Chei Olamim. Yigadal V'Yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, Ve'almadi B'Akutei V'Melech Malchutei, V'chayechon V'yomechon V'chayelcho Beit Yisrael, B'gala V'zman Kariv, Imru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mevarach, Ve'alam Alamei Alamaya, Yibarach V'Yishtabach, V'Par V'Shamam Minasei, V'Dadar V'Dalai V'Dalal, Shmei Negudesha, B'Richu, Leila Min Kol Birchata V'Shirata, Tishbechata V'Nechmata, Damiran Be'alma, Imru Amen. Baruchu et Adonai Havorach. Baruch Adonai Havorach Le'olam Va'ed. You may be seated as we continue with the blessings for Kriyat Shema, page 150. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or uvorei choshech, oseh shalom, uvorei et hakol. Hakol yodu. Ein kerkecha ve'ein zulatecha, efes b'techa mido melech. Ein kerkecha Adonai Eloheinu b'olam hazeh, ve'ein zulatecha makinu l'chayei olam haba. Efes b'techa go'aleinu limod HaMashiach, ve'ein damelecha moshienu litchiyat ha'metim. El Adon al kol ha'masim, baruch u'mvorach befi kol neshama, gadlo v'tuvo, malei olam dat u'tvuna sovevimoto. Hamitgoel al chayot hakodesh v'nedar bechavod, al merkavam zechut u'mishor lifnei chiso chesed v'rachamim lifnei chvodo. Tovim meyorot shebaro Eloheinu yitzaram bedad mevina uvaskel koach ukvura natan baem liyod moshlim bekerev tevel meleim ziv umfikim noga noe zivam bechol haolam semechim betzeitam mesasim bevo amosim b'yeim ha'retzon konam Peye v'chavod nonim lishmot al averina lezecher malchuto kara l'shemesh ha'yizrach ora v'hitkin surat havana shevach nonim lo kol tzeva maharom tiferet u'gedulas rafim v'yofanim b'chayot hakodesh La'el asher shava mikol masim. Yitbarach Mosheinu al shevach masei yadecha ve'al me'orei or shasita yifaru chasela. Yitbarach tureinu malkeinu v'go'aleinu b'rei kedoshim mishmashim. Kulam avim, kulam berurim, kulam giborim, v'kulam osim be'em avir ha'retzon konam, v'kulam potkim be'bihem midusha, v'torah, b'shira, u'v'zimra, u'mevarchim, u'meshabechim, u'fa'arim, u'maritzim makdishim, u'mamlichim, et shem ho'el ha'melech ha'gadol, ha'giborim Le'akdish yotzram b'nachat ruach, V'safa b'ra v'nima kedosha. V'lam gecharonim v'omrim b'yira. Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzivot, Melech ol haaretz kivodo. Ve'alfanim v'chayot hakodesh, ve'rash gadol min haseim l'mat serafim, l'matam meshabchim ve'omrim, Baruch kivod Adonai mimkomo, ve'el Baruch imo yiteinu. Or Chadash al Zion Ta'ir v'nizkechu lanu meira le'oro Baruch atah Adonai Yotzer ha'meorot Abba Rabba Avinu Shalom, Me'arba kanfot haaretz, V'tolichenu kamamiyu le'artzenu, Ki el poel yeshuot ata uvanu acharta mikolam lashon, V'kerab tanu l'shimcha, Gdosela be'emet, Lodot lecha liached chaviyahava, Baruch atah Adonai, Abocher emo Yisrael b'yahava. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, B'chol levavecha, B'chol nafshecha, B'chol meodecha, Ve'hayu advarim ha'eleh, Asher Anochi mitzavecha, Hayom al levavecha, Veshinantam levanecha, V'dibar tabam, Veshivtecha b'veitecha, V'lachtecha v'derech, V'shochvecha v'kumecha, Ukshartam leoda yadecha, V'ayu l'tortafot b'ninecha, Uktavtam amezuzot veitecha, U'visharecha, Ve'aya im shamah tishmeu mitzvotai Hashem. Adonai Elohechem emet, v'yatzim elochem v'yom v'yom L'dor b'dor k'yam v'shmo k'yam, v'chison achon u'malchuto v'emunato lad, k'yam edudvarav chayim v'chayamim, emrim nechmadim lad, u'lamei olamim. Malkim Malachim Yotzenu Tu Shabbatenu Hodenu Matzlenu Elam Shemecha In Elohim Zulatecha Ezra Tavotenu Atahu Me'olam Magenu Sheisha Shema Kol Bechorei Amarak Tov Bechor Chachat Tilo L'Elayom Baruch U'Morach Moshe Uvim Miriam U'Bnei Yisrael Chanu Shira V'simcha rabba v'yamru chulam Mi chamocha ba'olim Adonai Mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh Norati lo tosef eleb שירה חדשה שיבחו גלים לשמחה שפת הים יחד כולם הדובים לכו ואמרו Adonai ימלוך לעולם ועד. We rise for Torah Yisrael, page 158. We begin the Amidah together, page 159, and then after the Kiddushah, continue with the individual whispered Amidah. Tor Yisrael, Kuma be'ezrat Yisrael, Uvdei chinumecha, Yuda be'Yisrael, Go aleinu Adonai, Tzvaot Shemo Kedosh Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai, Gal Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avoteinu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor, Hanorah, El Elyon, Gomel Chazadim Tovim, V'konei Hakol, V'zocher Chasdei Avod, U'mevi Goel Livnei V'neihem, Leman Shemo V'yahava, Melech Ozer U'foked U'moshia U'magin, Baruch atah Adonai, Magin Abraham U'foked Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayim Eitzim Atah Rav L'Oshia, Mashiv HaRuach U'morid HaGeshem, Mechakel Chaim B'chesed, Mechayim Eitzim B'rachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim V'rofei Cholim, U'matir Asurim, U'mekayem Emunato, Lishenei Afar, Micha Mocha Bal Gevurot, U'mido Melech, Melech Memit, U'mechayeh, U'matzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman atah l'chayot metim. Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh hametim. Yekadesh et shimcha ba'olam, Kishem shemakdishim odo b'shmei marom, Katuv al yad neviecha, V'kara zeh el zeh v'yamar. Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzivot, Meloch Haaretz Kevodo. Az bekol Rash Gadol, Adir v'chazak mashmim kol, Minasim lumat serafim, lumatam Baruch Yomeru. Baruch Kevod Adonai Mimkomo, Mimkomecha Malkeinu Tofia, V'timloch aleinu ki mechakim anachnu lach, Matai timloch b'tzion b'karov b'yameinu le'olam va'ed tishkon, Titkada v'titkadash, V'toch Yerushalayim yircha l'dor v'ador, L'netzach netzachim, V'yeineinu tirena malchutecha, Kadavar ha'amor b'shirei uzecha, Haidei David Mashiach tzidkecha. Yimloch Adonai le'olam, Elohai Yitzion, L'dor v'ador, Hallelujah, L'dor v'ador nagid, God lecha, L'netzach netzachim k'dushalcha nakdish, V'shivracha Elohim mivin olim u'sh'olam v'ed, Ki el melech gadol v'kadosh ata, Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el ha'kadosh. Please, Mach. haven't completed your individual whispered Amidah, please continue davening. We join together for Kaddish Shalem, page 167. G'dah v'g'dah shmei rabba. Ve'amati v'agdei v'mlich ma'agdei v'chayim shalim v'chalim v'chayim v'chayim Yisrael. B'agalav v'zman karivim v'ramein. Yehi shmei rabba m'vorach le'olam me'almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpar v'yitshma v'yinaseh. V'yidar 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 shmei n'kedusha b'richu. Le'elam mikol b'gadav v'shirata tush b'gadav v'nechmata. Damran b'ma'avim v'ramein. Tidgabat sultan v'adon l'chol Yisrael. Kadam avhoni v'shmaya v'ramein. Yehi shlama rabba min shmaya v'chayim v'nevakol Yisrael v'ramein. Hoseh shalom v'ramav. We turn back to page 112 for the Psalm for Shabbat. Yom Yom Shabbat Kodesh, Shabo Hayu Elohim Omrim B'Beit HaMikdash, Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbat. Ginuvu Meseva, the Sheni Marani Miu, like Yitkia Sharanai, Tsuri, Vlovlatavo. Kaddish Avelim, Mourner's Kaddish, page 121. Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Shemei, Rabbah, Ve'alma, Divra, Kirute, Ve'amlich, Mahute, Chayechon, Uvyomechon, Uvchaye, Dechol Beit, Yisrael, Va'agala, Vizman, Kariv, Vimru, Amen. Yehi shmei rabba mevarach le'alam alamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yinaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei l'kedusha b'richu. Le'ila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechmata damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Seh shalom v'ramav. Hu yaseh shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. We continue with the service for taking the Torah out of the Ark, page 168. Welcome everybody to Congregation Agudat Achim's in-person and live stream Shabbat morning service. It's a pleasure to join with you this morning. For those of you who were here earlier, our Psukei Zimra, creative Psukei Zimra warm-up for prayer option this morning was Iyun Tfilah, a study of prayer. And we really dove in to the idea of study as a part of prayer. Now it's interesting, we begin every day with the recitation of the blessings on Torah study and some select passages of Torah study, and we looked at those passages and a couple of alternative passages and talked about what it would be like to have those. What does it mean to start your day with that kind of an intention? But on Shabbat, we also have the opportunity, also Mondays and Thursdays, right? But we also have the opportunity to read from the Torah in a more performative way, where the goal is not just Torah study, but actually to experience revelation, to experience the words of the Torah as if they are being given at Sinai. And I think, right, the rabbis were intentional about separating these out, that we have to do both the sort of Torah study aspect where we're engaging with the text, and we also have to do the sort of public recitation aspect of Torah, where it feels like with all the pomp and circumstance of Sinai. And we get both in our Shabbat morning service because we have the time, we can take the time to really see what the Torah, to really engage with the Torah in different kinds of ways. This morning we're reading Parshat Trumah, and as we have been doing, we're asking folks who are honored with an aliyah to the Torah to come up to the base of our bima as opposed to on the bima. And because of that, we begin with the Hagba so that everybody is able to have a visual recognition of the text of the Torah at the beginning of the service. Page 168. Ein kamocha Elohim Adonai, ve'ein kemasecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim, u'memshaltecha b'chol dor v'hador. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed, Adonai od le'amo yitein, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom, Avarachamim, heitiv avirtzoncha et Zion, Tivnei chomot Yerushalayim, Tivnei chomot Yerushalayim, Ki becha levad batachnu, Melech el Ram benisa, Adon olamim. Ayivin Saharon vayomem Moshe, Adonai yafutzu aymecha, yadusu misadecha, ipanecha, ki mitzion teisei Torah, ki mitzion teisei Torah, udemar Adonai mirushalayim, Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah, Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah, le'amo Yisrael, b'kedushato. Beit Ne'yanara Beit B'Vishnei Kadisha Kadisha Yakira Anai Mar Tush Bechan Ye'era Kodama Tetitach Libi B'Yoraita Betashlim Mishalim Delibi Beliva Bechol Amam Yisrael Betal Chaim Belisha. Amen. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo. Gadol Adonai Iti U'Rav Shemo Yakta Lecha Adonai Hagedula Ve'Hagebura Ve'Atiferet Ve'Hanetzach Ve'Hod Ki Chol B'Shamayim U'Ba'aretz Lecha Adonai Hamamlacha Ve'Haminaseh L'chol Livrosh Ramamu, 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 Ramamu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'Yishtachavu, Ve'Yishtachavu Le'Hadom Raglav Kadoshu Ramamu, Ramamu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'Yishtachavu, Ve'Yishtachavu Le'Har Kodsho Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. We remain standing as the Torah is lifted.
Okay, hang on a second. Just hang on a second.
Mizot HaTorah Shem Sam Moshe Livnei Bnei Yisrael Al Pi Adonai B'yad
Yoshi HaKosi Boban Omar, Amen. HaKol, HaVavod Eloheinu Kvod LaTorah.
They'll direct you.
Tamod, Arona, Hamer, Yitzchak, Zefroma, Rishona, Baruch Shanatan Torah, Le'amo Yisrael B'Kedushato,
V'atem hadikim b'na'lechem, Hainu Chem Hayom.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Baruch.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Elam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch et Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch et Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Page 495, verse 31.
Amen. V'asita farochet techelet v'argaman v'tola'at shani v'shesh masar ma'aseh choshev ya'aseh otah kruvim v'natata otah al arba umidei shitim mitzipim zahav v'avehem zahav al arba nechaseh v'natata et haparochet tachat hakrasim v'hevei tashama mibei laparochet et aron ha'edut v'hivdi laha haparochet lachem ben hakodesh uven kodesh hakodashim.
Baruch et Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah temet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch et Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Tamod, Gilabat, Abraham, Yoram, Sheni. We're on verse 34.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Baruch.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. V'natata et hakaporet al aron ha'edut bekodesh hakodashim. V'samta et hashulchan michuz laparochet v'et hamnorah nochach hashulchan al tzela hamishkan temana v'hashulchan titain al tzela tzafon v'asita masach lepetach ha'ohel techelet v'argaman v'tola'at shani v'shesh mashzar ma'aseh rokeim v'asita lamasach Chamisha amudei shitim v'tzipita otam zahav avehem zahav v'yatzakta lahem Chamisha adnei nechoshet. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam etah b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yamod. We're on chapter 27, verse 1 on page 496.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaBarach. Baruch Adonai HaBarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. V'asita et hamizbeach atzei shitim chamesh amot orech v'chamesh amot rochav ravua yeh hamizbeach v'shalosh amot kamato v'asita karnotav al arba pinotav mimenu tiyana karnotav v'tzipita oto nechoshet v'asita sirotav l'dashno v'ya'av umiz rakotav umiz legotav umachtotav lechol kelav ta'aseh nechoshet.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Nice job. Tamod. Big one.
Heschel Sarah Bat Yoshua.
Sarah Bar Yoshua. Verse 4.
Baruch atah Adonai El. Oh, sorry.
Baruch hu Adonai hanvara.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai havarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bacha banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Yasita lo mikbar maser reshet nechoshet. Yasita al hareshet. Arba tabaot nechoshet al arba kitzotav. Nutatau tachat karkov hamizbeach milmata. V'haita hareshet ad chatzi hamizbeach. Yasita vadim lamizbeach b'deyatzei shitim v'tzipita otam nechoshet v'huva et badav v'tabaot v'hayu habadim al shtei tzalot hamizbeach bis'ed oto nuvuv luchot ta'aseh oto kasher hera otha behar ken yasu.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet v'hayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Wait. For those who don't know, Perry and her father Ken moved up to our community, down to our community this summer. Perry celebrated her bat mitzvah just a few weeks ago on Parashat V'Shalach, and she did so near her family's home base. But I know that many of our seventh graders did attend virtually, and we're very excited for this to be her first aliyah that she has taken in our community since becoming bat mitzvah. We're going to offer you this blessing. Yishabeirach Avraham Abraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah v'Yivarech et Peshel Sarah bat Yoshua she'egia lemitzvot v'ata yom lichvod hamakom lichvod haTorah lichvod haShabbat HaKadosh Baruch Hu yishmoreha v'yichayeha v'yichonein et liba liyot shalem im Adonai Eloheha La'agot b'torato l'lechet b'drachav v'lishmor mitzvotav liyot amitza limtzo et Yehuda v'liyot isha ohevet v'ahuva v'nena hayom u'v'chol yom l'chein l'chesed rachamim v'einecha v'nei kor'eha v'shlach bracha v'atzlacha b'chol ma'aseh yadeh yihi ratzon she'yizkeh aviha legadla l'torah l'chupa l'ma'asim tovim v'nomar Amen. May the one who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah bless Harry Sophia Levine, who has been called to the Torah upon reaching the age of mitzvot and a few weeks, with reverence for God, for the Torah and Shabbat. May the Holy One protect and sustain her, helping her to be wholehearted in her faith, to study Torah and fulfill mitzvot, and to walk in God's ways. May she have the strength to find her calling to be a person who is both loving and beloved, and may she find love and compassion today and every day in your eyes and in the eyes of all who see her. May her parent rear her to maturity, guiding her to a love of Torah, to the blessing of Chuppah, and to a life of good deeds. And let us say, Amen. As you know, it's my custom to invite our B'nai Mitzvah to assign me an assignment, just as I asked them to prepare a lot for service. Well, Harry did not celebrate becoming a bat mitzvah by leading us in a service here. We do hope that she will in the future do so. And I did study with her in preparation of writing a Dvar Torah for her bat mitzvah. She asked me to read the book The Wishing Well, The Wishing Spell, all of a sudden it's the first in the Land of Stories Chronicles, which are by Chris Colfer, the famous actor from Glee. The Wishing Spell. And this is a book which engages with, it's sort of a modern fairy tale. It engages with the fantastical, but through the realm of storybook, through the realm of fairies and fairy godmothers and princes and princesses. Not only did I read the first one, but I am halfway through. I read the first 3 in the series of 6. And I think that it really speaks to this engagement with storytelling as an aspect of what it means to create identity. And so my charge for you, my blessing for you as you think about what it means to really have become bat mitzvah and what that means for you in the context of our community is that you learn to tell your own story in a way that is deeply connected to the story of the Jewish people and the story that we all tell each other, right? This idea of the land of stories. Every place that we interact with is a land of stories because we are the sum of the stories that we tell about ourselves, about who we are. So that's my hope for you, is that you will continue to engage with our community, with our Judaism, both in my class on Thursdays and also next year in the high school program, and continue to tell the story of your story as it interacts with the story of the Jewish people. So we wish you a mazel tov, and I know that Jackie will also have some gifts for you at the end of the service. All right, now you can sit down.
We're on 497, verse 9. What? Well, you're coming sheet. That's all right. We'll switch them.
Baruch hu Adonai Baruch. Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Boed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bacha banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Yasita et hatzar mishkan lifat negev teimana kloim lechatzer shesh mazar mea be'ama orech v'pea ha'echad v'amudav esrim v'nehem esrim nechoshet v'avei ha'amudim v'hashukehem kasef v'chein lifat tafon ba'orech kloim mea orech v'amudav esrim ידניהם עשרים נחושת ועובי העמודים והשוקיהם כסף ורחב החצר לפת ים קלעים 50 אמה עמודיהם 10 וידניהם 10.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Ya'amod. Yoshua ben David, B'Pesach Shishi, verse 13.
Baruch Adonai HaBarach, Adonai HaBarach Le'olam Va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. V'racha v'chatzer lif'at kedma mizracha 50 ama v'chamesh esrei ama kla'im l'katef amudehem 3 v'yadnehem 3 ולכתף השנית 15 קלעים עמודיהם 3 וידניהם 3 ולשאר החצר מסך 20 אמה תכלת באגמן ותלת שני ושש מזר מעשר רוקם עמודיהם 4 וידניהם 4.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natav zochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Number 7. Gabi ben Moshe, Shvi'i.
I just want to say that Ken's Aliyah this morning is also in honor of his father's upcoming yahrzeit, which is this week, Robert Levine tomorrow. And we, first of all, may his memory be a blessing. And also, when we were picking out which week we should celebrate Perry's having become bat mitzvah, we wanted to pick a date that would also be meaningful for the family in that way. And I think truly it is beautiful to have been able to be with both of you and in memory of your father, and to really to celebrate that moment with you today. So again, I just want to wish you a huge mazel tov. And we're so excited that you're a part of our community, and Yehi Zichro Baruch.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaBorach. Baruch Adonai HaBorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Kol amudei achatzer saviv mechushakim kesef avehem kasef yadnehem nechoshet orech achatzer me'abiyama v'rachav 50 ו-50 v'koma 5 amot 6 marzar yadnehem nechoshet lechol kalei hamishkan b'chol avodotav b'chol yidedotav B'chol yitidot hachatzer nechoshet.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Dave Levine, not Robert Levine. There are two Levines who are on yahrzeit today, so I got the wrong one. But it's Dave. I'm so sorry. We rise as the ark is open for the healing prayer. Avotenu mekor habracham meimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishbeirach Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka Rachel v'Leah, Yivrech v'Yirpei Tacholim, et Sima Freda bat Meir Lev v'Chana Yenta, v'et Riva Bela bat Avram Chaim v'Reza, v'et Sarah bat Avraham, v'et Akiva ben Gitto, v'et Miriam bat Malka, v'et Eliyahu ben Malka, v'et Mari Travaizo, v'et David Aram ben Siva, v'et Liba bat Shemda v'Chatzel, v'et Asher Yosef ben Fega Malka, v'et Fega Leah bat Minzasura, v'et Dinsa bat Liba, v'et Yoreh bat Avram v'Sarah, v'et Aaron ben Chava, v'et Shlomo Yosef, v'et Dvorah Shena bat Malka, v'et Chaim ben Getzel, v'et Bracha bat Mayra, v'et Vet kol acholim b'gila hakdusha azod. Haggadah Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachamim Aleihem Lachzilamam Urapotam Ulachzikam Ulchayotam Mishlach Lahem Meira Refuat Shema Min Hashamayim Refuat HaNefesh Refuat HaGuf L'chol Evrihem Migdeihem B'dok Shar Cholei Yisrael Ba'olam V'chezek Yedei Yotzkim Mitzorcheihem Shabbat Yom Lazok V'Arufak V'Alavo Hashabbat Alav Izman Kariv V'Nomar Amen Mishebei Rachimotenu Mikor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Yikadav Yikadav Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Almighty Baruch Yerutei v'Yamlich Malchutei
V'chayechonu v'yomechonu chayei Beit Yisrael B'Galava
Seh, V'yata Dar, V'yata Lev, V'yata La, Shemei Dekudashah,
Very good.
Le'olam Mikol Berachata V'shirata, Tushbechata Nechemata,
Damiraniyah.
Yimeru.
Amen.
Yamod, Micha, Masara, Maftir. Verse 17.
Baruch Hu Adonai Hamborah. Baruch Adonai Barak Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Hamim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Kol amudei achatzer saviv mechushakim kesef avihem kasef biadnehem nechoshet orech achatzer me'abiyama v'rochav 50 ו-50 v'koma 5 amot 6 mashzar biadnehem nechoshet l'chol kalei hamishkan b'chol avodah tov v'chol yidei dotav B'chol yididot hachatzer nechoshet.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Natan Lanu Torah Temet V'chayei Olam Nata B'tochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Nice job, man.
Gil's buttons.
The Haftarah for Parashat Trumah
Memphis is both of our daughters.
can be found in the book of 1 Kings, the section which describes Solomon's building of the temple in Jerusalem, which makes an explicit connection between the Mishkan, the temporary dwelling place of God in the desert, and the Mikdash, the sanctuary, the temple that in the permanent home of the Jewish people in Israel was built. So we turn now to page 500 as Steve chants the Haftarah for Parashat Trumah, page 500.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachar Binvim Tovim V'ratzav Divreihem Hanemarim Be'emet Baruch Atah Adonai Abocher Batorah Umoshe Avdo Uve'Yisrael Amo Uvidvieh Ha'emet V'Tzedek V'Adonai Natan Chochma Lishlomo Kasher Diber Lo Vayhi Shalom Bein Chiram Uvein Shlomo V'Yichretu V'Rich Nehem Vaya'al HaMelech Shlomo Mas Mikol Yisrael Vayhi Hamash Shloshim Elef Ish Vayishlachem Levanona 10,000 Bachodesh Chalifot Chodesh Yuval Vanon 2 Chodashim Beveito Va'adoni Ram Al Hamahas Vayhi Lishlomo 70,000 Nosei Sabah Ushmonim 1,000 Chotzef Bahar Levad Misarei Hanitzavim Lishlomo Asher Al Hamalacha 3,000 ו300 Harodim Ba'am Ha'osim Ba'melacha Vaitzav HaMelech, Vayasihu Avanim Gedolot, Avanim Yikarot, Leyased Habayit Avnei Gazit, Vayivseluhu Bonei Shlomo Uvonei Chirom Vehigavlihim Vayachinu Haitzim Veha'avanim Livnot Habayit Vayhi Vishmonim Shana Ve'arba Me'od Shana Latzeit B'nai Yisrael Me'eretz Mitzrayim V'ashana HaRivi'it B'chodesh Ziv Hu HaChodesh HaSheni Limloch Shlomo Al Yisrael Vayiven Habayit Ladonai Rehabayit Asher Bana HaMelech Shlomo Ladonai Shishimama HaOrko Ve'esrim Rochbo Ushloshimama Komato Ve'ha'ulam al pnei Heichel Habayit Esrim Ama Orko al pnei Rochav Habayit Eser Ba'ama Rochba al pnei Habayit Vayas Labayit Chalonei Shekufim Atumihim Vayiven Al Kir Habayit Yatsi Asaviv Et Kirot Habayit Saviv Lehechal Veladvir Vayas Laot Saviv Hayatzia Hatachtona Chamesh Ba'amarach Baha V'hatichona Shesh Ba'amarach Baha V'hashlishit Sheva Ba'amarach Baha Ki Migraot Natan Labayit Saviv Chutza Levilti Achos Bekirot Habayit Ve'habayit Vehibanoto Even Shlema Hamasa Nivna Umakavod Ve'hagarzen Kol Kli Varzel Lo Nishma Babayit Vehibanoto Petach Hatzela Hatichona El Ketef Habayit Haimanit Uvelulim Ya'alu Al Hatichona Umin Hatichona El Hashlishim Vayiven et habayit vaychalehu vayispon et habayit gevim usterot ba'arazim Vayiven et hayatzia al kol habayit chamesh amot komato vayechos et habayit ba'atze arazim Vayhi Dvar Adonai El Shlomo Lehemor Habayit Hazeh Asher Atavonei Im Telehe bechukotai, ve'et mishpatai ta'aseh, ve'shamarta et kol mitzvotai lalechet bahem, vahakimoti et dvari itach, asher dibarti el David avicha. V'shachanti betoch b'nei Yisrael, v'lo ezov et ami Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, sur kol haolamim, sadik b'chol hadorot, ha'el ha'ne'eman, ha'omer ve'oseh, ha'medaber u'mekayim, shekol devarav emet v'tzedek. Ne'eman atahu Adonai Eloheinu, v'ne'emanim devarecha, v'davar echad midvarecha, achor lo yashuv rekam, ki el melech ne'eman v'rachaman atah, baruch atah Adonai, ha'el ha'ne'eman b'chol devarav. Rachem al Tzion ki hi beit chayenu, ve'la'aluvat nefesh toshia bimhera v'yameinu, baruch atah Adonai, v'sameach Tzion b'vaneha. Samcheinu Adonai Eloheinu be'eliyahu hanavi avdecha, u'v'malchut beit David meshichecha, bimhera yavo ve'yagel libeinu, al kisolo yeshev zar, ve'lo yimchalu od acherim et kevodo, ki v'shem kodshecha nishbata lo, shelo nikbei nero le'olam va'ed, baruch atah Adonai, Magen David.
Amen.
Al HaTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al ha'nevi'im ve'al yom ha'shabbat hazeh shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu likdusha ve'limnucha lechavod u'letifaret al ha'kol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach u'mevarchim otach yitbarach shimcha befi kol chai tamid le'olam va'ed baruch atah Adonai mekadesh ha'shabbat.
Amen. We call the Ten Commandments in Hebrew Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 utterances. Comes from the same word as Dalet Bet Reish, daber, to speak. But as we learned this morning when we were looking at Mishnah Peah, which begins Elu Divarim She'ein Lahem Shiur, these are the Divarim that are without measure. What follows there is not a list of words or utterances, but a list of actions. Gemilut Chasadim, Talmud Torah, Hashkamat Beit HaMidrash, Shachrit V'Arvit, right? Acts of loving kindness, coming to the synagogue morning and evening. Also, the 10 Commandments are not simply utterances, but also a list of actions. Jewish tradition teaches us that words matter not just because of their meaning, but also because of the actions that those words inspire. That's why, or one reason why, the report that came out this week from Amnesty International that refers to Israel as an apartheid state is so dangerous. It's dangerous because it's not just what the word means, but also the actions that those words inspire. Every time a libelous report like that comes out, it increases the security risk for Jews all around the world. On Thursday, I had the opportunity to attend a seminar with Yossi Klein Halevi, who is a journalist and author in Jerusalem, and a fellow at the Hartman Institute. The program was offered through APAC. And, well, he said a couple of things that stuck with me. I just want to share a couple of them with you. First of all, he reminded me that the current governing coalition of Israel, which he described as maybe the best government since he made Aliyah, which is a startling thing for him to say. But the current coalition is the most diverse in Israel's history. It is comprised of both Jewish and Arab parties for the first time in Israel's history. It combines secular and religious members, those with disabilities, the LGBTQ community, immigrants, second-generation Holocaust survivors. In contrast, the tyrannical apartheid system in South Africa enforced segregation and contributed to the dehumanization of citizens in both law and in practice. It wasn't an extraordinarily diverse government. I'm not trying to say that there aren't human rights concerns with regard to Israel and its treatment of the Palestinian minority, both the Israeli Arab population and the Palestinians in the West Bank. I do think there are concerns. I do think we should get involved in imagining the Israel that we want to exist. But when enemies of the Jewish state refuse to engage in a conversation about the actual human rights violations and about the potential to make the state a safer and better place for all of its citizens and for all who dwell there, and instead call the state, which is a flourishing democracy in a very harsh part of the world, an apartheid state, that closes off the conversation and makes everybody less safe. So that's one thing. The second thing is Yossi Klein Halevi speaks on campus regularly, and he says that right now the state of Israel is being accused of genocide of the Palestinians. Not just to be an apartheid state. He says actually being referred to as apartheid is like, maybe a step back from the accusation of genocide. I hadn't really thought about it in quite those terms. But I wanted to share both of those thoughts with you. The Rabbinical Assembly and the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism reject Amnesty International's dishonest claims and lies and biases about Israel, at which they disregard and downplay many actual facts and present only a one-sided version, which hurts the prospect of peace. They wrote, "Not only does Amnesty International apply a double standard in its analysis, but its repeated demonization and delegitimization of Israel as the Jewish homeland echoes the tenets of modern anti-Semitism. The report will inevitably embolden anti-Semites around the world who seek to undermine the only Jewish state in existence. We call for its full retraction and expect others to reject such outrageous characterizations now and in the future." This isn't the only thing that came up for Israel this week. Prime Minister Bennett also seems to have taken a step back from his government's commitment to the Kotel Agreement. And I encourage you to get involved, both locally, where you can reach out to our elected leaders, our members of Congress, and our senators, and remind them that their voice matters, that their words inspire actions, and that they should get up and condemn the Amnesty International report. But we should also get in touch with the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. His name is Mike Herzog, and I sent out his email address earlier this week on Thursday morning to share with this government of the State of Israel that as conservative Jews, it is heartbreaking to us that we are unable to worship at the Western Wall in the way that we would like to worship. It's complicated. We have to be full-throated in our defense of Israel against those who would label it as apartheid, while also recognizing and acting on the ways in which Israel and the government fall short of their commitments to their religious and ethnic minorities and to world Jewry. So I encourage you to get involved in both of these aspects. Don't look the other way. Lean in. Invest in relationship with Israel. We turn now to page 178 for the prayer for the state of Israel. Was somebody assigned to read this? If not, we can read it all together. Page 178. Avinu Shabashamayim, Sur Yisrael v'goalo, Barech et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Smichat Gulatenu. Hagein alea be'evrat chastecha, ufros alea sukat shlomecha, ushlach orcha v'mitcha l'rashea, sarea v'yoatzea, v'taknem be'itza tova milfanecha. Chazek et yedei miginei eretz kodshenu, v'anchilem Eloheinu Yeshua, v'ater nitzachon tatrem, v'natata shalom ba'aretz, v'simchat olam liyoshvea, v'nomar amen. We continue now with Ashrei, page 181. Josie, did you want to lead us? One 181.
Zecher Raftu Hayabiyu V'Tziktu Yuraneinu. Tov Adonai La'akol V'Rahakol Ma'asav. Kevod Malchutecha Yomer Rug V'Ura Hayedaber. Malchut kol malchut kol amim umem shaltacha v'chol dor v'ador. Heinei kol alecha yisaberu v'ratam l'tamachem l'tam beito. Tzadik Adonai v'chol derachav v'hasid b'chol ma'asav. Ritzon Yiriyav Ya'aseh V'yetshvatam Yishma V'yoshiam. Tehillah Adonai Yidaber Pi V'Riyav Kol Basar Shem Kodsho Le'olam Va'ed
Hallelujah. We rise for the service of returning the Torah to the Ark, page 183.
Hallelujah, Shem Adonai, Ki Nizkar Shemo Levado. Hodo Aleres V'Shamayim Vayarem
Keren leyamo, Te'yalecho Hasidav, Livnei Yisrael, HaKerovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
Mizmor LaDavid, Havu l'Adonai b'nei Elim, Havu l'Adonai kavod vos, Havu l'Adonai kavod shemo, Yishtachavu l'Adonai be'adrat kodesh, Kol Adonai el hamayim el hakavod hirim, Adonai el mayim rabim, Kol Adonai ba'koach, Kol Adonai be'hadak, Kol Adonai shover ha'azim, Vayshaver Adonai et arzei ha'avadon. Vayarkidem kemo egel, Levanon v'Sirion kemo ben reimim. Kol Adonai chotzei lavot eish, Kol Adonai yachil mimbar, Yachil Adonai mimbar kadesh, Kol Adonai yechol el hayalot. Vayehasof yarod upehalo kulo omer kavod, Adonai lamavu yasham, Vayishev Adonai melech leolam, Adonai Elohim, Adonai yivarech echamo v'shalom. Uvnecha yomar. Ki lechach tov natati lahem, Torati al tazovu. It's time. Lama haziklam, v'tov me'ushar, derach darkei noam, v'chol tzivotech shalom. Hashimenu Adonai, Elecha v'nashuva, Hadesh, Hadesh Yameinu, Hadesh Yameinu Tirkei.
Shabbat Shalom. This week's Torah portion describes the construction of the menorah, several different points. And so there's a midrash that describes those multiple explanations of how the menorah was supposed to be built in the following way. Moses goes up to Mount Sinai to get the instructions, the blueprints for how to put together the Mishkan, and God tells Moshe, here's how to do it, and Moshe says, okay, I've got it, and he walks down the mountain and completely forgets how to build the menorah. He tries, he gets the right materials, but he just can't do it. So he goes back up to the mountain. He says, God, I just couldn't do it. I'm so frustrated. Can you tell me again how to do it? So God again tells Moshe, okay, here's how you build the menorah. And you make it this way, and you do it exactly like this. And Moshe goes back down the mountain, sure that he's going to be able to get it done. and he puts a lot of time and effort into trying to do it, and he is unable to, and he gets really frustrated, and he goes back up the mountain and he says to God, I couldn't do it. And so God causes a fiery image, we might say like a hologram, right, of the menorah to appear right in front of Moshe. And Moshe is able to walk around it and see it from every angle. God is saying, here, this is what it's supposed to look like in the end. Now you'll remember. And Moshe walks down the mountain, sure that he's going to be able to do it this time, and again is unable to create the menorah. So Moshe goes back up to the mountain, and God says, Moshe, just ask Bezalel for help. And Moshe goes back down and says, Bezalel, we need to create the menorah. And without even being told the instructions, Bezalel creates exactly the image of the menorah that Moshe was shown in a vision, in a fire, like a hologram. It's a beautiful midrash that I think really speaks a lot to Moshe's growth as a leader, what it means not to do everything yourself, what it means to understand multiple intelligences, that different people have different strengths, what it means to be able to say, yeah, Bezalel is the one who should be constructing the menorah. Moshe has other strengths, but Moshe isn't an artist. Even when Moshe sees an image of what it should be, he can't make the materials match that image, but Bezalel can do it even from the written out blueprints that we get in the Torah. Bezalel just knows how it's supposed to look. So it is also in our lives. Our leadership can't do everything themselves, and it's important in community to understand the multiple intelligences by which people connect to Judaism so that everybody feels like they are a part of creating the Mishkan. I spoke about this a little last night at Kabbalat Shabbat, but there is an idea that is called the IKEA effect in social sciences. The IKEA effect is the idea that even if you didn't design the furniture yourself, and even if you just got a package with all the pieces, if you contributed to making that piece of furniture, like you put it together yourself, you're going to have more emotional investment in it than if you just bought it fully formed. And I'm not knocking the Billy bookcase, right? It's a very nice bookcase. But IKEA furniture is not, super nice furniture. But anybody who has a Billy bookcase will tell you, right? Building it themselves makes you a little more attached to it. They did a study where they invited folks in and taught them how to fold an origami crane. And then at the end of the lesson, they said, and how much would you pay to take your crane home with you? And the people said, probably about a quarter, right? 25 cents. And then they turned to people who had not participated in the workshop and asked how much they thought these paper cranes were worth. And the average was about 5 cents, a nickel. And so from this we can sort of extrapolate that a person thinks of something as 5 times more valuable than it is just by virtue of having helped to create it. We care more, we invest more in things that we invest in. in things that we help create. Now, the Torah describes this very clearly in our parsha about the Mishkan. It begins with the trumah, the gift that everybody gave. Everybody participated in whatever way they could, whether it was like Bezalel through their hands, through their handiwork, or whether it was like some of the the princes through giving big gifts, or whether it was like through everybody by giving what they could afford to give. Everybody participated in the creation of this sanctuary for God, this place where God would dwell within the people and among the people. Now, we don't have a Mishkan, but in some ways, Shabbat, as Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel said, Shabbat is a sanctuary in time. And it's no accident that we refer to the process of preparing for Shabbat as making Shabbos. It takes work to make Shabbos. It takes effort and thought, forethought. You have to make sure that your clothes, your Shabbat clothes, are fully laundered from the previous week. You have to make sure that you go shopping early enough in the week that you know what your meal plan is going to be, to prepare the food before sundown on Friday, to make sure that the house is clean and that it looks nice. Making Shabbos is a thing that actually takes a good portion of the week. And it's supposed to be that way. We're supposed to invest our time in creating this sanctuary, this palace, in time. It's only with the input that we put in that we're able to really reap the value of the reward of Shabbat. We're able to have a day of cessation from work, a day of rest, a day of ceasing, because we did all of the work on Thursday and Friday before sundown. It's a gift that we give to ourselves through our actions. So just like Moshe has to be taught about multiple intelligences, about delegation, about what it means to share leadership, about what it means to understand that maybe he's not the right person to make this part. So too, in our families and in our community, there are different ways to participate in the process of making Shabbat. And my hope for us all is that we spend the time that it takes to make Shabbat for ourselves. Because through investing our own time, we will care about it and be invested in it even 5 times more than we would have if we did not. Shabbat Shalom. We continue with our Musaf service, which begins with Chatzi Kaddish, page 184, and then with the Amidah, page 185, and then after the Kiddusha, we'll continue with the individual whispered Amidah. We rise, page 184.
Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divrach yirutei, be'amlich malachutei,
B'chayechonu v'yomechonu v'chayei l'chol Beit Yisrael.
Bagala,
Ubizman karim.
V'yamaru,
Amen.
Yehi shemei Rabbah mevarach,
Me'alam lal me'almayahi.
Yitbarach, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitromam, V'yitnaseh, V'yithadar, V'yithaleh, V'yithalal, Shemei Nekudesha, Berechu, Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, Tushbechata v'nechamata, Damiram le'alma, V'yamaru, Amen. Na'aritzcha v'nachtichcha kisotziach sarfei kodesh hamakdishim shimcha b'kodesh kakatuva yad neviyecha v'karaza elze v'amar
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzivot, Melech haaretz Kivodo.
Kivodo malei olam mishartav shomim zeh lazeh ayei mekum kivodo le'umatam baruch yomeru
Baruch Kivod Adonai
Mimkomo hu yifen berachamim Ve'yahonam ham yachadim shemo Erev avoker bechol yom tamid Pamayim v'yaham ha'shema omrim
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Hu Eloheinu, hu Avinu, hu Malkeinu, hu Moshienu, ve'hu
Yashmienu berachamav, she'yidei kol chai. Ve'hu yashmienu berachamav, she'yidei kol chai.
Liot lachem Elohim.
Ani Adonai Eloheinu.
Divrei katracha katuv lemor.
Imloch Adonai le'olam Elohai Tzion, L'dor vador, Hallelujah.
L'dor vador nagid gadacha, u'lenetzach netzachim k'nitzatecha nachtish. V'shivchacha Eloheinu mipinu le'yamush le'olam va'ed. Ki hamelech gadol v'kadosh ata. Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el ha'el.
your individual whispered Amidah, please continue davening. We join together for Kaddish Shalem, page 203.
Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabbah. Ve'alma divrach yirutei, ve'amlich malchutei, v'chayichon uvyomechon, uv'chayei dehol Beit Yisrael, v'agalau v'zman kariv v'yimeru.
Amen.
Yehi shemei rabbah me'vara, le'alama le'almayad. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitrumam v'yitnaseh, Viet Hadar, Viet Halev, Viet Halal, Shemire Kudasha, Barihu, Le'elam in Kober Hata Vashirata, Tushbachata Venehamata, Dar Miram Be'alma V'yimaru. Amen. Tiv Kabal Salot Honu Vauthon, Dechol Yisrael Kadam Avuhon Divishmaya V'yimaru. Amen. Ehe Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, Dechayim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'yimaru. Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimrumav, Uyaseh Shalom, Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'yimeru. Amen.
Yasher Koach to Caitlin for leading us in our Musaf service, and a Yasher Koach to everybody who participated in our service this morning, especially to Ellie Moses for chanting Torah, and to Dan Moses for chanting Torah, to Steve Schmidt for chanting the Haftarah, and to Josie Moses for leading us in Ashrei, to everybody who was here, and to everybody who joined us on live stream, welcome and thank you for joining us this morning. And also a special mazel tov to Perry and to Ken Levine on the occasion of celebrating Perry's first aliyah to the Torah in our community on the occasion of her having celebrated becoming bat mitzvah a few weeks ago. We also wish happy birthday to Herbert Reich, Robin Rutenberg, Jill Levenheim, Sonia Treviso, Caroline Weiss, Steve Kramer, Jess Hausler, Ron Scharf, and Joe Sheng on the occasions of their birthdays this week. And to Jake and Amanda Middleton on their anniversary, which is tomorrow. Mazel tov. And if you have any special occasions that you'd like to share with us, we would be honored to celebrate with you and to announce such special moments from the Bima. We continue now with Ein Keloheinu, page 204.
Ein Keloheinu,
Ein Kadoshenu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kvoshieinu, Mi Keloheinu, Mi Kadoshenu, Mi Kemalkeinu, Mi Kemoshienu, Nod Eloheinu, Nod Eladonenu, Nod Elemalkeinu, Nod Elamoshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shetiru, Avotenu, Lechanecha et Ketoret Hasamim. Please rise for Aleinu.
Shamayim v'yoser aretz, u'moshav yecharo v'shamayim imal, u'shchinatu zo, egav he'meromim, hu Eloheinu inod, emet malkeinu efes ulato, belevavecha, ki Adonai hu ha'Elohim, b'shamayim yimal, v'al ha'aretz mitachat enod. Kagatu v'torataha Adonai yimloch li'olam va'ed v'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol ha'aretz bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo
Congregation offers condolences to the family of Roz Marks, who passed away this week, and honors the memories of the following individuals who have gone to their eternal rest: Bursutskai Ben Umovna, Albert Friedman, Anna Jacobs, Bernard Lown, Dave Levine, Robert Levine, Doris Stone, Gladys Golub, Luda Baradullin, Pauline Goldstein, Edward Reisman, Sarah Sobolski, Mayor Ben Amos, Harvey Sharfstein, Rose Simon, Nathan Bilgore, Helen Friedman, Bernard Hurwitz, Faye Horowitz, Mildred Shapiro, and Karen Fink. In solemn testimony to the unbroken chain of faith which links one generation of the house of Israel to the next, those who mourn and those who are observing Yartzeit now rise to magnify and sanctify God's name with the words of Kaddish Avelim, Mourner's Kaddish, page 207. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah Be'alma divra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon u'vyomechon u'v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru amen. Ye'ei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam alamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yinasei v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kudisha b'richu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom imramav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Jackie is going to offer some announcements on behalf of the Board of Trustees and also give some gifts to Perry on the occasion of her having become bat mitzvah.
I'll do my announcements first because they're not as fun. Tomorrow at 11:30 is a religious school family program where the whole family can learn about Havdalah. Tuesday at 10:45 a.m. is Rabbi's Parshat Hashivah class. In the evening at 6 p.m. is Intermediate Hebrew with Sipora. You can contact her if you'd like to join that. Wednesdays at 10 a.m. on Zoom is the Healthy Living Group. The next meeting of the book club is on February 9th at noon, and it is Let It Be Morning is the book. Wednesday evening at 7:30 is a Sadie Schneider Rosh Chodesh learning group with KB Goodkin from Federation, and it's Dinah Primal Powerful Political. Wednesday at 8 p.m. is the Scholar Stream. Thursday, the 10th at 7:30 p.m. is the rabbi's class, Together and Apart, the Future of Jewish People. And that's it for this week. That's quite a bit going on. Do you want to come up, Perry? This is my new friend, Perry. She's very cool. Perry is a competitive ice skater, which is awesome. And she just moved here over the summer, but she has made herself right at home here in our Hebrew high school with, all the kids, and is having a great time. And she's in 7th grade, and she likes math and technology for a lot of my own part. And we just want to say mazel tov, and I have some stuff for you. And again, they didn't label it. So, let's see. I know that there is a Kiddush cup and a set of candlesticks. And they're from different organizations in the shul. Sorry, I don't have my, and then there's something else in this big box, which
I think it's a stuck box.
could be a tzedakah box. Again, I think that's from the school, right?
Yeah.
And the Kiddush cup and the candlesticks are from the Hutton Family Memorial Fund. So you got cool stuff there. And we have this certificate that says you're welcome to Torah. And we are very happy to be able to celebrate this with you, a special occasion. And we're glad that you guys are part of our congregation. So, mazel tov.
Mazel tov, simin tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, simin tov, simin tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, simin tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, simin tov, yeilanu, 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 ulecho Yisrael, yeilanu, yeilanu, ulecho Yisrael, yeilanu, yeilanu, ulecho Yisrael, yeilanu, yeilanu, ulecho Yisrael. We conclude our service with Adon Olam, page 211.
Adon Olam, Asher Malach, B'Terem Kol Yitzir Nivrach, Li'et Nasa, V'Chefsako, Azai Melech, Shemo Nivra, Ve'acharei, Kichlot HaKol, Levado, Yimloch Nora, Ve'hu Haya, Ve'hu Hovel, Ve'hu Yeh, B'Tipara, Ve'hu Echad, V'Ein Sheni, Lehamshilo, Lehachbira, Ve'li Reshit, Ve'li Tachlit, Ve'lo Ha'os, Ve'Hamisra, Ve'hu Eli, Ve'chai Goali, Ve'tzor Chavli, Be'et Sarah, Ve'hu Nisi, Umanos Li, Menat Kosi, Be'yom Ekra, Be'yado, Afkid Ruchi, Be'et Ishan, Ve'a'imra, Be'im Ruchi, Geviati, Adonai Li, Ve'lo Ira, Adon Olam, Asher Malach, B'Terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, Yi'et Ashla, V'Hefsako, Azai Melech, Shemo Nivra.
Shabbat Shalom.